Rising up the middle. He's in! Utah leads. Daniels for the win. Caught. It's good. LSU does it. Mason Taylor.
Hey everybody, how are we doing today? Another video, a third video today. Hopefully I can get one or two more in. We have the Lowdown CFB coming up at 6 o'clock Eastern, so look up the Lowdown Network. It is THA, not THE. Everything is spelled exactly how it sounds. I am Colin Baschnagel, your host, of course, on my channel here. And right here, by the way, is my TikTok Bashes at CFB show. And then up here at this corner, you see this playlist. If you like this video, check out that playlist because all the videos are similar, just having to do with all the other teams. We just did Conference USA, and we got Florida State right here. Penn State is up next. And I am excited for this one personally. Everybody is super high on this Florida State team. We're going to talk about what they have, what they lost, and overall if they're upgraded or not, how difficult their schedule is, and are they going to be able to run through it. We'll talk about that below here. This is something I started very recently. Last year's stats, just throwing up a handful of key players from last year's team that are returning that I'm going to put stats up for. So, for example, if I were doing this for Ohio State, I already did the Ohio State video, I would have whatever stats Kyle McCord, the projected starter, has. Though, of course, I say that Devin Brown might be the starter there. Anyway, last thing I'm going to ask of you is make sure you like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it, especially if you do like it. And also comment down below what you think Florida State's going to do. And then comment down below, hey, guess what, YouTube? I'm opening up to you. If you want to see a team on YouTube, comment, and I will do it. I mean, I got to get through all Power 5 teams anyway. So if you just comment a team down below, I'll make sure to get to it in the next couple of videos. All right, we're going to start with the players leaving, the players as key departures leaving for the NFL or the pro level. I'm going to start with wide receiver Ontario Wilson. He is leaving for the NFL. He was an undrafted free agent for the Chargers. Don't know how that's going to go for him. And then guard Dylan Gibbons off as well. He was undrafted as well. And Jamie Robinson, he was drafted in the 5th round. So those are the players leaving. Overall, not losing too much. Ontario Wilson, he was a pretty good receiver for this team. I think he was the second leading receiver on last year's team, if not third. He was really, really good for them. Transferring out. All right, here we go. Transferring out. You ready for this? Running back, Treshaun Ward, he's going out to Kansas State. Wide receiver, Micah Pittman, he's going to Utah. And then wide receiver, Malik McLean, going out to Penn State. On the offensive line, 2 tackles are leaving. Lloyd Willis going to Marshall, as well as Rod Orr going to Toledo. Interior guys, you have Antavius Woody going to UAB, and then Zane Hearing going to USF. As we move to the defensive side of the ball, Derek McLendon is going out to Colorado for Dion, also going to Colorado on the defensive lineman Bishop Thomas. A couple more edges that are leaving are Shambi Jackson going out to UMass and George Wilson going to Campbell. And another defensive lineman, Jarrett Jackson, is going to Michigan State. Linebackers leaving, Sidney Williams, he's going out to Missouri. Amari Gaynor is going out to North Carolina, and then Stephen Dix Jr. is also going to Marshall alongside of his former teammate and now still going to stay teammate, Lloyd Willis, on the other side of the ball. Cornerbacks that are leaving, Sam McCall, highly rated safety coming out, kind of moved to corner, maybe a nickel. Not sure what he's going to do, but a really talented kid. Definitely a guy to keep an eye on, one of the best recruits that they had in their 22 class. Sam McCall going to Texas A&M, Amarian Cooper going to Colorado, and then Malik Feaster going to Memphis. Also a cornerback, I'm not sure, but he was a highly rated recruit and really good. Damari Tate is a guy to watch out for. He's undecided. I haven't seen anything as far as him. I don't even know what's going to happen in his career. I hope he doesn't just get lost in the portal because he was really good coming out of high school. Brendan Gant, Colorado, and Travis J. Colorado, both safeties going to Colorado. Yeah, that was a mouthful, but not a whole lot of key players, right? If you look at what they had, you could say Micah Pittman, they lost. Well, they have Johnny Wilson coming back. You could talk about Trayshawn Ward, somebody who they lost. They have Trey Benson coming back. So who did the Florida State Seminoles bring in? You got to start with wide receiver Keon Coleman. That was a big deal in transfer. Now, a lot of people say that was Michigan State's best receiver. Jaden Reed. But anyway, it was a 1A, 1B situation. Keon Coleman is a heck of a player, and he's going to complement this offense very, very well. Jaheim Bell is a guy at tight end that everybody highlighted. He's really good, but a Division II guy who absolutely dominated from Shorter University, Kyle Morlock, is a guy to watch out for as a guy that I think could potentially have a big year, especially in a lot of 12 personnel that they're going to like to run in this offense. On the offensive line, they brought in Jeremiah Byers. Again, a big-time pickup. I know he's from UTEP. Not a whole lot of you know about him. He is one heck of a player. He is one heck of an offensive lineman. He's probably, well, we'll talk about their current roster breakdown in a second. Interior offensive linemen, they brought in two of them, Casey Roddick from Colorado and Keandre Jones from Auburn. Now, on the other side of the ball, they brought in defensive lineman Braden Fiskey. Now, Fiskey, again, Western Michigan, G5 star. This is a theme here with the Florida State Seminoles and bringing in these guys that were in lower levels of football. I mean, a Division II tight end who are coming in. They were stars at that, and now they're going to try to participate as a big part of this roster. Also, a defensive lineman, Daryl Jackson, comes in from Miami, and then Gilbert Edmond, another good player on South Carolina. He's an edge rusher. And then finally, Fentrell Cypress, a big-time recruit. I think he was probably the second best rated DB in the entire portal. Fentrell Cypress, a really, really good player, and he's going to probably start at one corner spot. I'm flipping this roster breakdown and breakout players so that way I could just get this out of the way. I got three for the Florida State Seminoles. On the offensive side of the ball, watch out for true freshman Hakeem Williams. I think he's going to play a good bit. You also have Kyle Morlock that I already mentioned at tight end. I think he's going to rotate in there with Jaheim Bell. And Jaheim Bell's versatility is a whole lot different than a big-time playmaker like Kyle Morlock is as far as a receiving threat. And then on the defensive side, look out for Azareya Thomas. Did I say that right? I hope I did. Azareya Thomas. I think I nailed that 100%. But yeah, he's really good. You watch his high school film, a super great athlete. He played both sides of the ball in high school, but everybody knew he was going to be a Division I corner. He's a really, really good player. All right, Florida State roster breakdown. We know about Jordan Travis, and they also have Tate Rodemeyer back, AJ Duffy back from a couple of years ago. Brock Glenn is the guy that they picked up this past year, flipped from Ohio State. Now, of course, that had more to do with Ohio State not really wanting Brock Glenn anymore because they were going after Lincoln Kienholz. We know about that whole situation. You got a good 1-2 punch. Lawrence Toafili is a really good number 2 to Trey Benson, who's, of course, the starter. I already talked about the tight end position basically with Kyle Morlock and Jaheim Bell. Got a little bit more to talk about with the wide receiver room. We know about Keon Coleman. We know about Johnny Wilson. Winston Wright is a guy who transferred in 2 years ago from West Virginia, who got injured before the season started. And there were a lot of high hopes for him. He had almost 700 yards at West Virginia, 63 receptions. He's a guy, Winston Wright, he's a guy that absolutely eats up the middle of the field as a slot guy. He's going to be a really good complement if he can stay healthy. I do think that you look at Hakeem Williams as probably that fourth wide receiver. A lot of places are probably not going to see that because they see Poitier and Williamson as two more experienced guys that are probably going to crack the rotation, even Douglas, but he's more of a slot guy. I could see Hakeem Williams playing early. On this offensive line, again, they patched up a lot. I talked about Jeremiah Byers, an offensive lineman coming in from UTEP. He's probably going to start on that right side opposite of Bless Harris. Bless Harris, experienced player, really good player. We'll see how he does on that left tackle position. Now you have center Maurice Smith calling all the shots with Casey Roddick in there, who's, again, another transfer, Colorado guy, transferring to Florida State. That was one that Dion wanted to keep that he lost. And then Darius Washington, a left guard, been a starter. Was he a starter, actually? I think he was the backup to Dylan Gibbons, who left for the NFL. Anyway, they're pretty solid on the offensive line as well with Keandre Jones. And again, Casey Roddick is pretty versatile because he could play center. This is going to be a fun offense to watch. I'm curious how they're going to look in this kind of pro spread that Mike Norvell brings to the table. On the defensive side of the ball, I see Braden Fiske, the defensive lineman from Western Michigan, making a big impact in the middle, pairing him with Fabian Lovett. And then, of course, you have Jared Verse, who everybody knows he's a really, really good player, projected to be a top 10 pick. He's going to be amazing with Patrick Payton on the other side. And Byron Turner, Gilbert Edmond, who we mentioned earlier as one of the transfers. Edmond, of course, the edge rusher from South Carolina. He's going to be a really good player for them this year. I'm a little bit concerned that they are not really that deep on the defensive line, but they have some depth pieces. They're not going to be bad whatsoever. Linebacker, you get a couple of experienced players in Kalen DeLoach and Tatum Bethune. I think they could be decent right there, right? DJ Lundy is also going to be good, but again, this is where depth is specifically concerned. They do not have a lot of linebackers who's going to be able to come in and play. Omar Graham and DeMarco Ward, young players, probably going to have to see the field a little bit, especially if, God forbid, injuries end up taking over that position room. Now in the secondary, I really like what we have here. Greedy Vance is a really good nickelback. He had 3 interceptions last year. You also have Fentrell Cypress. I already talked about him. He's a really, really good player. And Renardo Green looking to, capitalize at that opposite corner spot. But the guy who has more upside is Azariah Thomas, the sophomore. He's going to challenge Green for some playing time. A more talented young kid. He needs to be able to, make a big impact as far as an athlete in the secondary, because they're not super deep when it comes to safety, and they really need that third or fourth corner that can really play whenever Green or Cypress gets tired, or again, injury. We got to watch out for that. Shaheem Brown is one of the safeties. I think there's a lot of question at that second safety spot opposite of Akeem Dent. And I think that's also where Azariah Thomas, you can't throw that out of the realm of possibility that they slide him to safety. I doubt they will, but you never really know how they're going to patch that up. KJ Kirkland, a true freshman who could also see the field early, and then Ashlyn Barker, a guy who could see the field early for sure. Now, talking about the special teams just real quick, you're going to have Ryan Fitzgerald doing the kicking majority of it with Alex Mastromano as your punter. All right. With that being said, guys, win total for Florida State, 9.5, which is honestly very, very good for this Florida State team. When you're talking about, what Vegas is trying to pinpoint here, you got to trust them. We don't want to go over the top, and we don't want to go crazy with saying, hey, this team is going to win 11 games and going to the playoff. With that being said, I got my schedule prediction. We're going to get straight into it right now. All right. Biggest game of week 1 by far. So many college football playoff implications specifically for the team that we are previewing, the Florida State Seminoles here. Will Florida State be able to win this game again, just like they did last year? Year 2 with Brian Kelly, this team for LSU likely going to be more prepared and less dysfunctional in some spots. In game 1, I'm going to say LSU wins. That was a game that, even though LSU played so poorly, they were this close to being able to win in the first place. Jaden Daniels had a fantastic fourth quarter, that last drive. And you got to remember, by the way, it was that fumble that Florida State had late in that game that gave LSU that shot. So I'll even give you that. But what happened last year doesn't matter anymore. Both of these teams are completely different. Both of these teams were not playing their best football at that point Not even close. They were yet to peak, right? They're going to be playing better football. This is going to be a massive game, probably going to be a top 10 game when the polls start coming out. I'm going to take LSU, but I think this game is another classic, just like last year's game. Southern Miss, I like Southern Miss in the G5, but this should be a win, no problem. At Boston College, I get it's right before Clemson, but Boston College is kind of a mess right now. I'm going to take the Florida State Seminoles there before they have to head to Memorial Stadium in Clemson. Cat's out of the bag. I already predicted the Clemson Tigers. I want to circle back to those two games between LSU and Clemson later in the video, but I do think Clemson, with an offense that I think is going to be slightly better, is going to be able to get that win at home, another close one. And by the way, 2 close losses against those 2 teams who are going to be probably top 10. If Clemson pulls that off, they will certainly vault into the top 10. I don't think Florida State's going to drop any lower than like 20 at that point in the polls, being at 2-2. Now we look at what they have after the bye. Win, win, win. 3 straight home games. I like Duke. They are not a sleepwalk. Virginia Tech, not really that good of a team. Bottom half for sure of the ACC. Syracuse, I think they lost a little bit too much to be able to come back on both sides of the ball. I get they have their quarterback back. I get they have Rondé Gadsden, who I really like. He's a really good player, but you need to have more. Syracuse lost a ton. Duke, they just don't have the depth of talent to be able to go into Doak Campbell, especially if they start having success and win that game. Now, what happens when you have 3 conference games in a row at home? You're probably going to have multiple or back-to-back road games in conference as well. At Wake Forest, very tough, okay? This is really tough because this is a point in the season where you could see some overconfidence almost from Florida State, and I think that this is a dangerous game because Dave Clawson gives teams hard time. It's a sleepy environment. It's not going to be super easy for Florida State to go in there, be awake. I think they win, but I think it's close. This is certainly a trap spot just because of the spot on the schedule. Now, Pitt, I think, could be a pretty decent team. I'm not going to predict them to do anything special personally, but again, back-to-back road trip, this could be really dangerous. I'm going to give Florida State the benefit of the doubt, say they win and they have Pitt's number in this situation, but again, this is not going to be an easy game whatsoever. The only difference is I think Wake Forest, they will win that game very close, and they'll kind of wake up and say, hey, if we want to win the ACC, we have to take care of business. We cannot put this in somebody else's hands. And I haven't previewed Pitt's schedule. Let's say they only have 1 loss in conference or less, even 2, given that they have already lost to Clemson. Pardon me. What you do when you lose to a team like Pitt in that situation who has 2 or less losses is you take power out of your own hands. You can lose a game in the ACC and still go to the ACC championship in most scenarios. Of course, 3-way tie scenarios or just a tie scenario where, any sort of tie scenario like that can change things. I'm not a fan of no divisions. That's a video for another time. They will take care of business after Wake Forest scares the crap out of them. Against Miami at home, a rivalry game, I am going to take the Florida State Seminoles. Now, there was something I meant to mention earlier about this, by the way. A transfer that they got in, Daryl Jackson, defensive lineman, came from Miami. I said this with Oklahoma, Texas, and Brennan Thompson and a couple of others. That should be a crime, man. I don't blame the kid, by the way, for making that transfer. Go wherever is best for you, but come on. Somebody's got to be like, you can't go to the rival. North Alabama should be a win, no problem. And then they have to go to Florida now. I am expecting this to be a win, but if Florida is better than I think, they have the talent to be able to compete. This was a 1-score game last year. I just don't think Florida is going to be anything special this year whatsoever. But that could be a lot tougher than it appears on the schedule right now. So, as you see it right now, Florida State 10-2, 7-1 in conference. That's good enough to go to the ACC championship if their losses to Clemson more than likely. Now we'll preview the rest of the ACC and we'll talk about conference championship games in the Power 5 later on in a later video. That'll be one video. Conference championships. We'll break down all 5 of the projected conference championship games before we do an essential preseason college football playoff pick video. So that means that Florida State is probably going to go 7-1. There are scenarios, though, where they don't. So make sure you stay tuned in for that. But one thing I'm going to tell you, if they can split LSU and Clemson and take care of business in the games that they are favored in outside of those 2, Florida State is going to be in the thick of the playoff, in the playoff conversation. That is just the truth of the matter. They have a lot of talent, and I initially came in here with a record of 9-3. They have so much talent. They have a lot to work with here, and given the promise that we saw last year, I was one that said, okay, but they didn't really beat too many tough teams down the stretch, right? They didn't really get challenged too much. Even in their bowl game, they played a 500 Oklahoma team, and they won a bunch of close games as well. Yeah, that's true, okay? But winning matters, and I think they upgraded their talent. Like I said, they're getting guys back. Winston Wright, they're getting him back. They're bringing in Keon Coleman. They have a stud freshman who they can plug and play. Johnny Wilson, really good player last year, was really close or pretty close to 1,000 yards. If he takes another step forward in his game, he's going to be really good. Jared Verse, game wrecker on defense. Ventrell Cypress, a guy they brought in, going to be a Thorpe Award finalist or in that conversation for a lot of the season. They've made a Jaheim Bell and Kyle Morlock. That's a really good pair at tight end. They made a lot of moves to upgrade their talent in the offseason, and they kind of needed to because they did not have a whole lot of recruiting momentum going the last couple of years. So Florida State, I'm not sure if they can compete or win a national championship, but I definitely think that they will give themselves a decent shot at the end of the day. Thank you guys for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Make sure you like and subscribe. And as always, make sure you comment down below what you think Florida State's going to do this year. Have a good one.